Well, hello, everyone, and welcome to Crushing Land. For this week, we're going to be talking about another applicable subject to your land investing business. This subject's a little interesting because it's one that either completely applies to you or doesn't apply to you at all. A lot of times you've heard me say something like, well, when you run into this, or as you grow, or as this happens, or whatever it may be. In this case, that's not, this is one's a little bit different here because we're talking about real estate licenses. So either you have a license and it 100% applies to you, or you don't have a license and it doesn't. It's, there's no middle ground with this. Now, obviously, you could at some point decide to go get a real estate license and it could become applicable, or you could have a real estate license and you could decide to let that go. So it could change, but what we're going to talk about either applies or doesn't based on that situation, whether you have a license or not. So to begin with, do you need a real estate license to do this business? And of course, the answer is no. A lot of people do not have real estate licenses. So simple answer, no, you do not need a real estate license to do this business. Are there advantages to having a real estate license? The answer there is it depends, straight up. Depending on how large you get, depending on where you invest, it could be or it could not be. So for example, I'm going to use my own background, my own story, where I came from. When I started investing, I was investing in homes. I wasn't investing in land. I was investing in homes, and it was in an area. I had a real estate license already, so I am licensed. I've had a license for 17 years now. With that license, I don't even live in the state where I'm licensed anymore, but I've just kept it going in case I ever wanted it for anything, or if I wanted to use the reciprocal part of it. There's a lot of different things. It's pretty minor to keep it going. It's just a few $100s a year, obviously, to continuing education, things like that. So I had one because I was an agent. That's actually how I started in real estate. I was an agent. I was listing homes, just normal agent stuff. When I switched to investing, I was investing in homes, and they were in the area that I was licensed. They were in that state. They were in my MLS area. So having that license proved beneficial because I could list the properties. I could pull comps from there. I could do all the different things that comes with licensing. Now, when I made the transition to land, it still proved beneficial because at the beginning, I worked again in that area. It didn't really help for comps and things like that with vacant land, but it did help in getting exposure. You put it out on the MLS, it propagates it out, it syndicates it out to all different sites, it gets more exposure, things like that. So that's where it came in handy. The thing is, as we grew, that kind of went away because where your license is very state dependent. You can get licenses in multiple states, but having licenses, generally speaking, people have them in a single state, or if you're in an area that's on borders and things, you may be in a couple states or a few states, but really not more than that. So if you're not going to be working exclusively in those states, the license doesn't really do you any good. On top of that, MLS areas are even more defined than the state. So a state, unless it's a very small state, is going to have multiple MLS areas. So where I live now in North Carolina, if I was working on properties right here, that'd be fine because that would be my MLS area. By the way, I'm not licensed in North Carolina, but if I was working on properties right here, I would be able to list them in the MLS. But if I just moved a couple hours east of here into a different area, I'm still in the same state, I'm still under the same license, but I would not be in the same MLS. So being able to use it to put properties out and things like that, that advantage is completely gone. My opinion, if I was starting out and I didn't have a license, I would not go get one. It doesn't offer a good enough advantage just to spend the money to go through the schooling, all the things that are involved. If I had a license, which I did, and if you have one, I wouldn't recommend letting it go because there's just really no reason to it. Do you need it? No. But, you just never know where it could come in handy, or you decide that you're really going to start working in a certain area. You found this really good pocket that you're working in and you want to use the MLS. You could use the reciprocal ability with that license to get licensed in the other state, start listing things on the MLS, going through that. So if you have one, I'd probably keep it. I've kept mine. You don't need to. But I just have, and I have thought of letting it go. But every time I think about that, I'm just like, well, it's so cheap. It's really, it's not something that I mind keeping up. Now, I'll be straight up. I haven't used anything with my license and the MLS access and all of that in quite a few years now. It's just sitting there, but I just never know. So I've kept it going. That's why I said, if I was starting out from scratch, I would not go out and get one. So that's kind of a little bit more details on whether or not you need a license, and just my opinion on where it stands and what I've seen throughout the years and things like that. Now, the question is, if you are licensed, I am, some of you are, some of you are not, do you need to do anything differently? You know, I'm licensed, I'm under ethics codes, I'm under these things. So what happens to me? What do I need to do differently in order to work with these potential sellers and buyers? In reality, not much. First off, it's just disclosures. So in our initial contact with people, it's just disclosed that I have a real estate license. It's very clear that I have a real estate license, but I'm not soliciting for a listing in any way. So just having a couple sentences here or there, it's in our contracts as well with our sellers and our buyers. So we're letting people know, we're just putting it out there that I have a real estate license and which state I'm licensed in. If I'm in a different state, I've heard that you don't need to, but I've also been advised that maybe it makes sense to still disclose. So we just do. Nobody cares. Honestly, I've never had a single person, never had a single buyer, I should say, come and be like, hey, your license, what is it? Nobody cares. And only one seller has ever questioned it. And after I explained it, they were fine with it. So literally nobody cares about that statement being made, but you're just disclosing it. Now, dealing honestly and fairly, people say, well, you know, what about that part? You got to remember, you're approaching the general public, right? With this, you're sending them a letter, you're marketing them, you're going out to these people and telling them that you're only looking to invest, not to list the property. So, for example, if somebody had a house for sale for $100,000, let's just use simple numbers, $100,000, you're the agent that has that house listed for $100,000. If you have it listed for $100,000 and you go and you make a $10,000 offer on that house to that seller, is there an issue with that? You would need to tell them, sure, but I'm listing it. I've listed it for $100,000 because I feel it's worth that. But for me, I'd be willing to offer you this. You can still make that offer, but you would just need to go through that because you have to deal honestly and fairly with them and let them know because it's your listing. But we're not talking about properties that we have listed here. Just because we have licenses does not mean that we now have to go in and say, oh, I think I can get you more for this, because they're not your client. So just because you're an agent doesn't mean that you can't be an investor as well. So just disclosing the fact is good enough. And since you're not, and we're telling them straight out, we're not establishing any sort of client agent relationship with them. So because we're not establishing any sort of relationship with them, we're just making an offer on a property and it's up to them if they want to take it, right? We're not telling them that's what the property's worth. We're not telling them that they couldn't get more. We're not saying anything like that. We're just saying, this is what I'm willing to spend. So that being said, as an agent, you can still do this the same way as long as you make those initial disclosures stating that you are licensed. So that's really the only thing different is in there. And obviously, if you have properties listed that you really like, you know, and say, I really want to buy this, but I wouldn't pay what I have it listed for. Well, then you do need to, you know, because now it is a client. Now you do have some fiduciary duties with them. And because of that, now you would need to go ahead and tell them, you know, I do think the market value on this is higher. That's why it's listed as that, but I'm not willing to pay that. I personally haven't done that because I've never listed other people's properties. Ever since I switched over to investments, that's been it for me. I stopped when I was listing homes and I stopped listing homes and switched over to investments, and I never listed another home again just for the sake of listing it. So it's never been an issue. But if you are in the real estate mind, you're looking at properties in the real estate, you're active as a real estate agent and you have some of these properties and you're seeing these things, then yes, you've got to be careful in that realm where those properties actually are under you, where you're listing them, because you do have obligations to your seller at that point. So that's really the only place where this comes into play. You know, over 1,000 deals, it's never been an issue. I've been licensed through every one of them, but again, none of them are my client. So because of that, that is a big difference there. So again, if you're watching this or listening to this and you're newer and you are licensed and maybe you have a property to list it and you're saying, man, I'd really like to, you do have to tread carefully there, and you have to be honest with them and you have to tell them the truth and things like that. And not that we ever lie to people, but what we're willing to pay is different than maybe what market value is, right? And that's the way we present it in our letter. But if you're listing the property, you really need to tell them that. You have to be very open with it. I believe market value is this. That's why I listed at this. But you know, this is what I'd be willing to pay. I've heard stories of people doing that and getting deals just because their clients liked them, didn't want the property, they didn't care. But again, I've never done that personally. But as soon as you switch gears, you're just going to the masses, you're going out to people, you're disclosing out there right from the beginning that you're licensed, but you're not soliciting a listing, you're not doing anything like that. You're just going out and you're looking for your own investments. You have protected yourself now at that point. You've let them know that, and you can go ahead and move forward as an investor. You can make the offers that everybody else makes. You can come in at whatever number you want because you're not telling them that this is the best they can do. You're not telling them anything about it. You're like, this is what, all you're saying is this is what I'm willing to offer. If you'd like to take this deal, we can move forward. And that's the end of it. So simple answer in this, there's no harm of having a real estate license. There's no need to have a real estate license. So if you have one, then go ahead, keep it. There's no harm in doing that, but don't feel like you need to go out and get one, to do this business. Now, obviously, if you want to add other aspects to it and you want to get involved with listings and you want to do, go ahead. I know some people that have done that. I have no desire to do that. I don't want to work with people like that, things like that. When it comes to the advantages for it, if you're kind of in different areas, you lose those anyway. You can still get properties on the MLS through other ways. And so, you don't really lose that access. It's just that you can't do it personally. So again, there's really no advantage to having a license. And then when it comes to actually doing this with a license, the key word is disclosure. That's it. Disclosure. Hey, I'm a real estate license, or I'm licensed in the X state, or, I do have a real estate license, but I'm not interested in listing your property. I'm doing this only for my own use. And that's where it's at. So again, it either applies to you or it doesn't, but we've had a lot of questions on that recently. So just wanted to cover that topic a little bit. If you have more questions, feel free to jump in, go to our group, our Facebook group, facebook.com/group/The Land Method. You can just search for it, or thelandmethod.com. It'll take you to all of our Crushing Land videos, which are also on YouTube, as well as a bunch of other content. So thank you guys so much, and we'll catch